my name is Mary Foster, and tonight I'm going to tell you about my team's feasibility study of building a biomass energy plant in the town of Berlin, New York. I'm first going to describe our project and its objectives, then walk you through our analysis that brought us to the best technology option, and ultimately describe the financial hurdles that are associated with this type of project. So first of all, a biomass energy plant uses woody biomass, which refers to the trees and woody plants that are byproducts of forest management. And this biomass is harvested from nearby forests and acts as the input for the plant, which we call the feedstock. This feedstock is burned during a conversion process, and there are pollution control mechanisms in place to help limit the amount of air pollution resulting from this process. The ultimate output is energy in the form of electricity, heat, or fuel. Our client for this project is the town of Berlin, which is located in central New York along the Massachusetts border, about 25 miles east of Albany. And although it is surrounded by abundant forest land, the town's economy is currently suffering. The small population continues to age as younger generations are leaving, and there are no large manufacturing industries that can create significant employment opportunities. So the town is looking for a way to improve its economic situation by utilizing its existing resources, and that's where our project comes in. We were asked to determine the feasibility of building a biomass energy plant with three main objectives in mind. The first and most important to our client was to provide jobs. The second is to support growing industry in the town by utilizing its existing resources. And finally, to promote sustainable forestry practices to ensure that biomass can be harvested in the long term. And based on these project objectives, we first needed to determine the potential size of the plant, which is measured in megawatts for the generation capacity. So using New York State average data and consumer information, we found that the existing load for the town is 2.5 megawatts of electricity. If we were to incorporate additional industrial use in the form of an aquaponics farm that's currently under construction or some other future industry, it would add 10 megawatts to this load, making it a total of 12.5 megawatts. The picture here shows what a biomass energy plant looks like. And although this is about twice as large as the larger size that we would propose, it gives you an idea of the type of land it requires. Two things to keep in mind are the fact that it has to be in an industrial zone. This makes it so that the plant can either sell electricity into the grid or it can sell it directly to a private business. Another consideration is to understand the feedstock delivery route to avoid the residential area as much as possible. Once we were able to determine the potential size and location of the plant, we needed to ensure that the biomass resource was indeed abundant enough to support this project. The procurement process involves three major players. The loggers physically remove the biomass from the forest with permission from the landowners, and this process is based on contracts with the timber management companies. In terms of how much there is available, we found that within a 50-mile and 100-mile radius surrounding Berlin, the removal rate is lower than the growth rate, which means that it is a sustainable harvesting rate at this point. And so the forest resources would not necessarily be a barrier to this plant, but there is one sustainability issue that could pose a problem to future government aid. And that issue is carbon neutrality. There's been a heated debate over whether or not biomass energy plants can be considered carbon neutral. And the definition of carbon neutral is that carbon released from burning the biomass is then captured by photosynthesis of the trees that are regrowing to replace those that are burned. And scientifically, there is less evidence that it would be carbon neutral. A Manomet Center of Conservation Science study stated that if you burn an acre of forest, it releases 15 tons of carbon dioxide emissions, and a standing acre of trees would take 60 years to sequester that much carbon. Most of the support for calling biomass energy plants carbon neutral comes from the political sector. So based on this evidence and this debate that we found, our team believes that the local biomass can be considered a renewable resource, but not necessarily a carbon neutral process with the plant. And this issue of carbon neutrality was important to us to address throughout our project, including our overall analysis, which is what I'm going to walk you through now. The biomass plant itself has different options for the conversion technology. Combustion, combined heating and power, gasification, co-firing, and biofuels. We were able to eliminate co-firing early on because it requires a coal plant to already be in place, which is not the case for Berlin. We also chose to pursue the larger plant size because it provides more jobs and allows for more growth, which is something the town very much wants. And since none of the other technologies had any major weaknesses at that point, we looked at other factors to understand which technology would be the best for the town. Shown here is a simplified version of our qualitative ranking system. We looked at 4 major categories: environmental impacts, social impacts, policy incentives, and infrastructure. And within these, there are multiple factors. Shown here are the average scores for each technology within the different categories, red being the worst, yellow being the middle, and green being the best. Ultimately, we decided that the 12.5 megawatt combined heat and power, or CHP, plant would make the most sense based on our ranking system. So we use this to inform our quantitative analysis to understand the economic impact and financial feasibility of the plant. For our economic impact analysis, we used an input-output model from the National Renewable Energy Lab, which utilizes data from a large database. And we use this to understand the potential economic impact of the plant for both directly and indirectly and how it would impact the town. Some of the major takeaways from this analysis were, first of all, the incredibly large plant cost. It would cost almost $70.9 million to build this plant, which is a significant cost for this town. However, it would provide significant economic benefits for the town, $12.1 million during construction and $4.9 million annually. It also would create a significant amount of jobs, which is important to the town as well. During the construction period, it would create a total of 84, and permanent jobs, there would be 15 at the plant itself, and the rest, the 19, would be felt throughout the town. So although this economic impact is somewhat beneficial, we found some difficulty when we looked at the financial analysis. So shown here is a simplified version of our overall financial analysis. On the y-axis, we have the price of electricity in cents per kilowatt hour, and on the x-axis, it shows the annual subsidies in millions of dollars. And the left point on the graph shows the estimated maximum attainable subsidy level for this plant, which we estimated to be $2.7 million based on case study research of similar types of plants. And at that level of subsidies, we found that our plant would have to charge 10 cents per kilowatt hour for its electricity. And this would provide a positive net present value, which means that the projected earnings are expected to exceed the capital investment. However, residents are currently only paying 6.5 cents per kilowatt hour, which is the point on the right, which means that in order to sell the electricity at that price, the plant would have to receive over $6 million in annual subsidies. So based on this, we found that the 12.5 megawatt CHP plant is not currently feasible under the market conditions because there's no precedent for receiving the amount of subsidies needed for the electricity price to be lower. To give you an idea of what's happening in the area, there's a plant in Lionsdale, New York, that's almost twice the size, but it could only receive approval for $4 million in annual subsidies in order to keep the plant from shutting down. So if the town were to want to pursue building this biomass energy plant, they will have to wait for electricity prices to be higher. If they do choose to follow this project, we would suggest 2 things. First of all, looking at the policy incentives available. There are a lot of specific criteria in the different policies that we encountered, so it's important for them to speak directly with the agencies to understand which works best for this plant. And second, to identify potential investors. Because the capital cost is so high, the town does not have enough money to put into this project. So we would look for someone to help sponsor this project. So we hope that Berlin is able to take these suggestions into consideration to help support their town in the future. Thank you.
Okay, questions from Thanks for the presentation. Did you account for the impact that the population might create on the energy production if they were to start, uptaking with solar panels, for instance?
So we didn't incorporate solar panels as much into our analysis because our focus was figuring out how much that they could use from this specific plant. There are some examples of towns nearby that do have large solar projects, so we think that that could be somewhere that the town could go in the future to help solve their problem in terms of trying to find more electricity, but they do already supply their town with sufficient electricity.
Thank you. That was a really good presentation. I wondered about the timeline on your cost-benefit analysis and whether looking at it perhaps through the lens of longer payback rates, given the benefit to the town, is something that would change your calculations.
So the payback rate was, I believe, 15 years, which is the life of the equipment. So it couldn't really go that much further out than what we analyzed. We tried to sort of fiddle with the model to try to make it as beneficial as possible. But unfortunately, at this point in time, it's difficult market for the plant.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.